It's not conditioned upon your even recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is given freely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This dignity is given freely, and it has a number of consequences, a number of implications. We looked at the implication of the freedom of conscience and the freedom and moral autonomy last time. But if you think and continue with this idea of the implications of this dignity, the area in which we would like to explore today is the area in which this dignity translates into the control Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given mankind over his creation, over his universe. This is another manifestation of the dignified status of human beings vis-a-vis the rest of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a level of control to human beings over the rest of his creation. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُم مَّا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا وَسَخَّرَ لَكُم مَّا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِّنْهُ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Behold, and he has subjected to your use all that is in the heavens and the earth. And he has subjected to your use all that is in the heavens and the earth. Behold, in this there are signs for those who reflect. لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this, and we see this in all communities, all nations, both historical and present, and it will continue in the future, that we are able to use the resources around us. And he has given us this creative capacity to be able to subjugate, bring under control the various elements. And of course, there are some elements of our environment that we cannot bring under control. This is beyond our capacity. But there are many things in our environment that we are able to bring under our control. We use the energy of the sun, we use the energy of the winds, we use the availability of and the capacity to travel on earth and in the oceans, on the oceans. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continuously makes reference to the beauty and the benefit of so much of his creation that again is for the benefit of mankind. And this is, and that he emphasizes that these resources are actually made manageable for us, that they are not so overwhelming in their capacity and their power that we cannot benefit from it. Right? So the intelligence and the capacity of intellect and the capacity of initiative that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us enables us to manage and utilize the resources and the rest of his creation. And then Allah reminds us that if you sat down and you reflected and you thought about all of these benefits, that you would not be able to count them. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا لَا تُحْصُوهَا. You are unable to count the favors that Allah has bestowed upon you. This is a very important reminder, that as we engage in the process of controlling and managing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's resources, that we should recognize very humbly and very carefully that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be thanked enough by us who are his creatures, and for whom Allah has subjected and subjugated so much of his creation for the benefit of human beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. He it is who has made the earth manageable for you. ذلولا. Yeah? This is an earth that we can manage, we can actually manage, that it doesn't overwhelm us. Yes, there are earthquakes, yes, there are storms and cyclones, and these are reminders of the ultimate power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these various creations of Allah. But nevertheless, despite all of those things, we are able to manage. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. He it is who made the earth manageable for you. So travel through its paths and its tracts and enjoy the sustenance he furnishes. وَكُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ. Eat of thee and enjoy sustenance, of the nourishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So this ayah, if you think about it deeply, this ayah encourages us as human beings to put initiative, put effort to utilize the resources of the earth through all legitimate means. Now I add this, and the ayah doesn't add it, the ayah doesn't say through legitimate means, but this is built into the broad understanding of the text, that while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the management of this universe, He has also constrained us. He has said that you do not do certain things, you do not abuse, you do not consume in excess, you do not waste. All of these are constraints. And one of the things that we have to begin to recognize in our modern lives is that we live under the pressure of capitalism, under the pressure of government initiatives, under the pressure of the desire and the greed for more by some, and the loss of even basic needs by so many. This imbalance that exists in our modern world, and it exists in history at various points in time. When this imbalance comes, then those of humanity who understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance must rise up and rebalance this imbalance. Yeah? This is part of our job as the ones to whom Allah has given the management of the resources. Now, when Allah says وَكُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ, there is another implication beyond just the proper management. There is an implication that the resources of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accessible to all of us, not just to some of us, but to all of us. And that when we كُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ, that it is because it's accessible to all of us in equal measure. This is part of the implied meaning, that this is accessible to us in equal measure, because all of us have equal dignity. When you accept this, then there is a constraint placed on how we consume. We do not overconsume, we do not overexploit, we do not hoard. And one of the challenges with our modern nation states is that countries declare, and who is the authority declaring this on the countries? The countries declare this simply by the power of the government. Right? That the United States has borders, and everything inside the United States is exclusively for the use of the citizens of the United States. Whereas these ayat do not have these constraints, right, of national borders. That the resources of the planet Earth, in fact, the resources of the universe, we will see other ayat that does not limit the subjugation of the resources of the earth to mankind simply to the planet Earth. It is as-samawati wal-ard. It's samawati wal-ard. So when you understand that, then you begin to see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is implying in the kulu min rizqihi that it should be equally accessible. And this is one of the biggest challenges that faces us as modern nation states. That the resources of the planet Earth are not accessible in equal measure to everyone. There is a high degree of separation between those who have and those who do not have. Fewer and fewer people have larger and larger amounts of things and access to resources. And larger number of peoples continue to have less and less access to resources. This is a balance that if you are a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you are a believer in the revelation given to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that we need to act to rebalance. We need to act to rebalance in the context of nation states, in the context of the current constraints. But we need to act to rebalance through education and through a re-engagement of the values with which we operate our resources, with which we operate our countries and our nations. This idea that we are responsible is also clear in another ayah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-A'raf, وَلَقَدْ مَكَّنَّاكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَجَعَلْنَا لَكُمْ فِيهَا مَعَائِشْ. It is we who have placed you with authority on earth and provided you with means for the fulfillment of your life. Again, it is a broad address. It is not for one group over another group, but it is for everyone. Then Allah is telling us here that we have given you authority, and always with authority, in every circumstance of authority, it is paired with responsibility. So when this authority to manage the universe, to manage the resources of the universe, falls on Banu Adam, on us, then the responsibility of managing it appropriately with the appropriate constraints and restraints also falls upon us. So that not one group of us can overexploit these resources and the rest of us suffer as a consequence. And the responsibility lies on all of us to restrain those who will abuse the resources. Now, this is a responsibility that I'm not sure we recognize as a responsibility on us. The world today exists and is exploited by a handful of few people. By a handful of people. You can understand this if you understand how resources are utilized, how resources are managed. Okay? And when we begin to understand that this imbalance has occurred, then you begin to understand the kind of effort that is needed to bring it back to balance. It is an enormous effort. It is an enormous effort. So let us begin to sort of think about how you as an individual, how we as individuals, as communities, begin to impress upon decision makers who are responsible, at least in the American context, back to you who are the voters. How do you respond to this imbalance? Do you bring attention and do you work towards restoring this balance? This is a critical question that we must begin to understand. Allah says, أَلَمْ تَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَأَسْبَغَ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَةً ظَاهِرَةً وَبَاطِنَةً. Do you not see that Allah has subjected to your use all that is in the heavens and the earth, and has made His bounties flow to you in exceeding measure, increasing measure, unlimited measure, both seen and unseen, both ظاهرا وباطنا. So Allah is emphasizing in this ayah that you see things with your eyes, and there are unseen benefits to you that continue to accrue to you. Do you not see that? Do you not see that? Because if you see that, then there is an implication. The implication is you cannot consume beyond a measure. We cannot consume while others are hungry, while others are unclothed, while others are unsheltered. We cannot, as a nation, or as a community, or even as individuals, continue to consume and hoard. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us not to hoard. The Prophet taught us not to hoard. That is the essence of zakat. That you don't keep building your wealth and not giving a portion of it away to cleanse your wealth and to support those who are in need. This is built into our very DNA. The Muslim DNA understands this. But sometimes that DNA is not apparent to us. That this extends beyond our individual wealth. It extends to our communal wealth. It extends to our national wealth, and it extends to the wealth of the world. And that we as Muslims, when we understand this responsibility on us as human beings, we're human beings, right? But there are other human beings who live on this planet that don't understand this responsibility, or certainly don't behave in that manner. And so what is left to the ones who are believers in God? And I'm talking about Muslim believers, and I'm talking to others who claim to believe in Allah. That is, we need to cooperate to figure out a way to change this imbalance. Now this word, سَخَّرَ لَنَا, right? تَسْخِير. This is an Arabic word, and it means to control. It means to manage. It means that there is a power Allah gives us, an authority Allah gives us to manage and to control and to subjugate the powers and the resources of the universe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الْأَنْهَارَ وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ دَائِبَيْنِ وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ. Do you see how expansive this subjugation that Allah is giving us as a gift is? This is not simply the minerals of the earth. This is not simply the wind and the air. This is not simply the water of this planet. Allah subjugated to you the rivers, and He subjugated to you the sun and the moon, constant in their courses, and subjugated to you the night and the day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the taskhir that He has granted us extends beyond this planet. And so the responsibility also extends beyond this planet. This is the scope of our responsibility. And perhaps the scholars and the communities, the believers who read these ayat before the 19th and the 20th and the 21st centuries had certain assumptions about the extent of the power. We now have the capacity to go into space, do we not? We have a company called SpaceX that wants to make vacation travel out to space a reality. And this will become reality in 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. We have missions going out to other planets to be able to see if we can use those. So this is already part of our lived reality, even though none of us have traveled out into outer space. At least I don't think anybody from this masjid today has gone out to outer space. But some of your children will. Maybe some of you will. This is Allah's taskhir to us. He's already given us that. But are we exercising it in a reasonable manner? So one of the things that we need to recognize as Muslims is that we have, particularly in the 20th century, this is particularly true of the 20th century and the 21st century that we lived in, that we have caused great harm to the environment by our overuse and abuse of resources, and this imbalanced use of resources. We as Muslims particularly need to understand that. And it's very overwhelming when I think of Syria, when I think of Iraq, when I think of Palestine, when I think of Burma, when I think of Chechnya, when I think of all of the places where Muslims are subjugated and oppressed, it becomes harder for me to think of this much bigger problem. But it must be something we devote a bit of our time to appreciate. Tomorrow is what is called Earth Day, April 21st. And it is a group of non-governmental organizations and communities and individuals who are seeking to re-educate ourselves on the dangers that is posed to our own planet Earth because of our overconsumption and our abuse of our resources. So I invite you to think about it. earthday.org. Go to that website and begin to engage. And many communities, and Lancaster is an interesting city in that it is in the middle of a very conservative area, but it itself is highly educated and very, very forward-looking and liberal. It is a beautiful thing that you live in and around the city of Lancaster. So take advantage of engaging with the local communities to begin to understand our responsibilities to restore balance to our environment. Allah says, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. He subjected to you all that is in the heavens. So we have gone beyond our planet Earth. We have gone beyond just our external atmosphere to the heavens. This is our responsibility. So when we think about taskhir, in short, there are two ideas that are very important to keep in mind. One, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us there's nothing beyond our capacity given by Allah to control in this universe. This is one implication of taskhir. But a second, much more important implication where we have become unbalanced, because you see, our scientists and our government institutions and our decision makers, they understand this first part of taskhir. Oh yes, we can control everything. We can raise mountains, we can raise mountains. We can destroy mountains and we can raise buildings that go up a mile high. Right? The tallest building is being built now where? Which city? In Jeddah, right? Which is 45 minutes from Mecca. The tallest building is being built now. So we can build buildings that are more than a mile high, and we can destroy mountains. Right? This is the taskhir Allah has given us. So we understand that power of it. But you see, there is a second implication of the word taskhir. And that is that all people are entitled to this taskhir. All people. Not just the people in this masjid, not just the people of this country, but all people. And so we will have to really reimagine how nation states work. And this is beyond the scope of a khatib's simple address to you on a Jumu'ah. Okay, this is way beyond the scope. But let me make sure we understand that does not absolve us because it is too difficult. No, this is a responsibility on us. It's a responsibility on each one of you, communally and individually. So engage in the process. And all our capacities are different. If the simplest capacity for you is because of Earth Day tomorrow that you plant one tree and let it grow, and you plant one tree every day and let it grow, or you plant 10 trees every day and let it grow, then that is the extent of our contribution, and that is good enough. But if your contribution is to really understand how socioeconomic factors work and create an economic model that can be then pushed to governmental institutions because you have the intellectual capacity to do that, then that is your responsibility. And everything in between. But let us communally accept this responsibility because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us. And like the nations of the past who were destroyed because they overstretched, they consumed more than was necessary. The Ad and the Thamud were destroyed by their own hands, by their overconsumption. Right? By their overconsumption. Those caves that were built, because they overconsumed and they overbuilt, it collapsed on them. And the same thing is going to, Allah, happen to us if we overconsume and we continue to cause this immense global warming that is underway right now. I was born in a country that is now called Bangladesh. Its southern coast hits the Indian Ocean. In 10 years or 20 years from now, scientists predict that whole west coast, southern coast, will be under the sea. In 30 years from now, it is possible that New York City, Manhattan, will be under 2 feet of water. And this doesn't compute in our heads. We live in Lancaster, right? Why worry about New York City? Because that is a worry that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you that you must own. That is the responsibility of tasbih. This is one thing that I'd like to invite you to think deeply about and engage in whatever capacity you can. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. In summary, the skill that Allah has granted us gives us the Sharia-based permission to explore and use to the best of our ability all the resources around us. But the second implication is that it is for all of us in equal measure. And this is where we as human beings are failing, that we utilize resources, but it is not equitably distributed. So I invite you to think about this deeply. This is the beginning of that conversation and the responsibility, not the end of it. Think deeply about this responsibility you carry. And it begins with the smallest idea that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, that don't go to sleep while your neighbor is hungry. Don't go to sleep while your neighbor is hungry. This is part of this immense spectrum of responsibility. And let us not abuse the planet in terms of our consumption of energies, that it destroys our planet and then beyond our universe. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. وقم الصلاة.